Raising a child is no small feat, right? It really does take a whole village. And sometimes that village has to go to great lengths, like taking down an antelope, to make it all work. Enter the incredible world of African wild dogs. These amazing creatures are not just adorable, they're a fierce pack working together to survive and thrive. Buckle up, because we're diving into their wild adventures. These canines are known for their strikingly patterned coats and their powerfully agile bodies. They have to be agile because these wild dogs lead a dangerous double life. By day, they're busy keeping each other in check. By night, they turn into ruthless hunters. But with all that action, there's a lot we don't see going on behind the scenes. What do these dogs talk about when no one's looking? And how do they deal with being so close to danger every single day? The first thing you might notice about these dogs is that they're not like any canines you've ever seen before. African wild dogs belong to the genus Lycaon. There are 4 extant species of lycanids, but they are only found today in Africa. They're related to wolves and jackals, but they're actually more closely related to hyenas than anything else. Don't ask us to explain that one. Anyway, wild dogs are medium-sized with long legs, large heads, and bushy tails tipped with white fur. Most of them weigh somewhere between 22 and 44 pounds. But above all, they're known for the patterns on their fur. Every single one of them has a different coat. Even identical twins can tell each other apart by sight. No two have the same spots, stripes, or speckles. It's like a barcode. Unique to each individual, scientists use these patterns to keep track of who's who in a pack. Pack is actually right. These guys aren't loners. They prefer to stick together in groups of up to 20 individuals. The secret to their survival lies in their tight-knit family groups called clans. Each clan has a complex hierarchy, but the most important position is held by the breeding pair at the top. This dominant couple has complete control over the pack. They decide where the clan will hunt and who will get what. If a female gets pregnant, she'll give birth to between 4 and 8 pups, which means that caring for the next generation is everyone's job. Both parents play with the pups, teach them how to hunt and defend themselves, and keep an eye out for danger. That last part is super important because if the pups don't make it to adulthood, the entire clan suffers. That's why every member pitches in to help raise the next generation. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and siblings all pitch in to care for the pups while mom and dad go out to hunt. The whole clan helps keep the pups safe until they're old enough to venture out on their own. But young pups are extremely vulnerable, just like babies anywhere. They can't see when they're born, and they can't walk for a few weeks after that. So if a predator comes along, they have to rely on mom and dad to protect them. That's why every member of the clan pitches in to care for the pups while mom and dad go out to hunt. It takes a village to raise a child. That's especially true for these guys. African wild dogs are endangered and have been listed as vulnerable since 2003. They face threats from habitat loss and conflict with humans, which have caused their numbers to decline. Today, fewer than 6,500 remain in the wild. If you're thinking about adopting a dog, think about adopting a rescue. There are tons of dogs out there who need a home. Not all of them look like the ones you're used to seeing. Just look at these goofy-looking cuties. They may not look like your typical canine, but they're just as loving and loyal. Okay, back to our wild dog friends. African wild dogs live in savannas, grasslands, and open woodlands across much of Africa. They tend to stay away from dense forest and mountainous terrain. These guys are built for running. They have long legs and big hearts, which help them keep up with their prey. Plus, they're really good at jumping and climbing over obstacles. When they're stalking prey, they have to be careful not to get too close. If their prey sees them coming, they're toast. That's why wild dogs rely on stealth and speed to catch their meals. Once they get close enough, though, they're in business. Their teeth are sharp and strong enough to pierce the skin of even the toughest animals. They also have really good hearing and eyesight, which helps them find and track their prey. And unlike most predators, African wild dogs don't rely on brute strength. Instead, they use their brains and their teamwork to take down their prey. To be fair, there is such a thing as an unlucky African wild dog. A sick or injured animal could end up being dinner for a hyena or lion. And if food is scarce, wild dogs might have to fight other animals for what they're worth. But most of the time, African wild dogs are pretty safe. They're just too fast for most predators to catch. And besides, they're really good at hiding, which makes it hard for lions, hyenas, and leopards to sneak up on them. And those are the only animals that are bigger and stronger than wild dogs. And yes, they can outrun the fastest land mammal on the planet, the cheetah. African wild dogs are so speedy, they can run at 45 miles per hour, and they can keep that pace up for a long time. Plus, they're really good at jumping and climbing over obstacles. So, unless a predator wants to waste a ton of energy trying to catch up with them, they're probably better off just letting them go. African wild dogs are social creatures who communicate with each other using a variety of gestures and vocalizations. They use scent to mark their territory and communicate with other packs. They also use visual cues like ear position and tail wag to show how they're feeling. And when they need to get a message across quickly, they bark, yip, growl, and even whoop. Yowling is thought to play an important role in their lives. Scientists believe that African wild dogs may use yodels to communicate over long distances, although we don't know exactly how it works yet. Yodeling is thought to be a form of acoustic communication, which means that African wild dogs use sounds to communicate, instead of visual cues like other animals. This could be useful when they're hunting, because it allows them to communicate without being seen. Acoustic communication could also be used to coordinate attacks, which would give them a better chance of catching their prey. But yodels aren't the only way African wild dogs communicate. They also use scent to mark their territory and communicate with other packs. They also use visual cues like ear position and tail wag to show how they're feeling. And when they need to get a message across quickly, they bark, yip, growl, and even whoop. Yowling is thought to play an important role in their lives. Scientists believe that African wild dogs may use yodels to communicate over long distances, although we don't know exactly how it works yet. Yodeling is thought to be a form of acoustic communication, which means that African wild dogs use sounds to communicate instead of visual cues like other animals. This could be useful when they're hunting because it allows them to communicate without being seen. Acoustic communication could also be used to coordinate attacks, which would give them a better chance of catching their prey. And their communication doesn't stop there. African wild dogs also use touch to communicate. They groom each other to show affection, and they also use touch to reinforce social bonds. Scientists believe that African wild dogs use touch to communicate information about their environment, such as the presence of predators or potential prey. Touch may also be used to calm other members of the pack, such as during a fight or when they're being approached by a stranger. Finally, African wild dogs may use touch to reinforce social bonds and establish dominance hierarchies within the pack. Now, you're probably wondering what all this has to do with surviving in the wild. Well, to be honest, it's everything. African wild dogs have to work together to survive. They need to communicate effectively in order to hunt successfully and protect themselves from predators. Their ability to work together also depends on their social relationships. So the closer they are, the better they're able to work together. That's why communication is so important to them. It's not just about giving orders or getting information across. It's about building relationships and creating a sense of community. But it's not always easy. In any social group, there are bound to be some conflicts. And African wild dogs are no exception. Sometimes there are disagreements over food or mates. Other times there are power struggles within the pack. But in general, African wild dogs are pretty good at resolving their conflicts peacefully. They usually don't resort to fighting unless absolutely necessary. Instead, they try to compromise or negotiate. And if that doesn't work, they usually just walk away. And that's the secret to their survival. They're able to put aside their differences and work together when it matters most. Without their social skills, they wouldn't be able to survive in the wild. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate these amazing creatures. They're truly one of a kind. African wild dogs are endangered, which means that they could disappear from the planet if we don't do something to protect them. Habitat loss due to human activity is the biggest threat to their survival. As more and more land is converted to farmland or urban development, African wild dogs are losing their homes and their ability to find food. But it's not just habitat loss that's putting African wild dogs at risk. Human conflict is also a major problem. As wild dogs come into contact with people, they're often killed or captured. This can happen for a number of reasons. Sometimes people kill wild dogs out of fear or ignorance. Other times, they're killed because they're seen as a threat to livestock or pets. And still, other times they're killed simply because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Thankfully, there are organizations working to protect African wild dogs and their habitat. One organization is working on a project to protect wild dogs in the Luangwa Valley in Zambia. The project is focused on reducing human conflict by educating people about wild dogs and teaching them how to coexist. Another organization is working on a project to restore wild dog habitat in South Africa. The project is focused on reintroducing wild dogs to areas where they have been extirpated and protecting them from extinction. And it's working. Since the project began, the number of wild dogs in the area has increased by more than 50%. But there's still a lot more that needs to be done. African wild dogs are amazing creatures who are an important part of our planet's biodiversity. They're also threatened by a number of serious problems, but there are things we can do to help protect them. By supporting conservation organizations, we can help ensure that these amazing animals stick around for many years to come. If you enjoyed this video, we'd love your support to keep the good vibes coming. Consider making a tax-deductible donation. It really helps us keep these videos free for everyone. Thanks a ton for being part of our community.